are back with the HubScale podcast, where we dive into the minds of security leaders all around the world. This week, we have Tom Kemp, investor, multiple co-founder, and author of Containing Big Tech, which comes out on the 22nd of August. I'm super excited to have you on today, Tom.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on, Elliot.
No problem at all. So anybody who listening who doesn't know Tom Kemp, it'd be great to have a quick introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a Silicon Valley-based entrepreneur, investor, and policy advisor. And most recently, I was the founder and CEO of a company called Centrify. It became a $100 million plus cybersecurity cloud provider, and we had about 2,000 enterprise customers that eventually got acquired by a PE firm. The company before that I founded, actually, or co-founded with some other great founders, actually went public. That was a company called NetIQ. And then after selling Centrify, I've been doing angel investing here in Silicon Valley. And so investing in seed rounds, and I have investments in, I think, about 15 different tech companies with a strong focus on privacy and cybersecurity. And then finally, have taken my knowledge of privacy and cybersecurity and applying it to public policy. And so I worked on the campaign here in California, where I live, called Proposition 24 back in 2020. That's the California Privacy Rights Act. And also have co-authored and proposed this bill to my state senator called the California Delete Act, which involves giving consumers the ability to mass delete their data from data brokers. And so then finally, I just took all that information and all that knowledge and wrote a book called Containing Big Tech that's coming out in August of 2023. So that's kind of my journey, and that's my background.
Yeah, no, and what a career as well. And we've got a few multiple mutual connections. That's how we got connected as well. But it's super exciting what you're doing right now in the seed round and the new book and everything as well, Tom. So real credit to you. But I guess I want to talk about the book first, because obviously it's a pressing thing, and you and I was talking about this last time we spoke as well. So why don't you just start off with a little bit of an intro about the book itself?
Absolutely. So first, technology is very complex, and increasingly there does need to be policies at the governmental level that address some of these things. But also, there seems to be a lack of understanding just with the common person about some of the issues involving, personal cybersecurity and privacy. And so what I wanted to do is create a simple and comprehensive look at the issues concerning the largest tech companies, what we call big tech, that you could hand to your Uncle Larry or your local politician and say, hey, this gives a good overview right here. And it connects all the dots associated with the collection of our data, heavily talks about the use of AI. What is AI? What are the positives of AI? How bias can be introduced in AI, how AI can be used for exploitative purposes, and just look at the overall issues of antitrust competition, which I think is very important for entrepreneurs because you now have, these large tech conglomerates that are dominating certain market places as well. So basically, I wanted to give a fresh look from a person that's lived and breathed here in Silicon Valley that has built companies involving privacy and cybersecurity, which are two of the bigger issues associated with big tech, and just give a fresh look and look at AI, TikTok, new laws, et cetera, that haven't been covered in past books. And so just really wanted to give a fresh and up-to-date look at what's going on with big tech, the good, the bad, the ugly, that we all deal with on a daily basis, because we're so dependent on the large technology providers' products. And so we do need to consider the impact of their companies and their products on our society, our democracy, and our economy.
Yeah. No, it makes complete sense. I can't wait to grab myself a book as well and read through it. But just tell me kind of you mentioned quite a few of the underlying themes there. But what kind of really stands out as kind of the most important thing to look out for?
Yeah, I think it's, it first and foremost, I mean, obviously your listeners are entrepreneurs, they're technologists, and we're kind of always been used to like selling a product, selling a product to enterprises, selling it to consumers, so we do B2B or B2C sales, and we're used to delivering goods and services that they constantly use. And it's really interesting that the largest tech players actually have a different business model, which is advertising. And their business model is predicated on collecting as much data as possible about each and every one of us, right? And that was fine in the past, where this overcollection of data was all about, serving us ads, and we would look at a luxury watch, and then for the next 4 weeks, every website had that damn watch right there. It was creepy, but that was okay, fine. That was the trade-off. But what's happening is oftentimes this data is being weaponized against us. And I know a lot of your entrepreneurs in the cybersecurity area can tell you, when you have all this personal information sloshing around and collected about you, it could actually be used against you from an identity theft perspective. And then when you start collecting data about kids and kind of surveilling them, and then kind of pushing them along or serving them ads, that's probably not healthy for kids. And then, of course, if there's personal and sensitive information about our health, we probably don't want advertisers or people that can just flat out buy it, knowing that we may have cancer or we may have diabetes, or that if you're a woman, you're pregnant, because actually that could be used to discriminate against you, right? And these are things that maybe you only know and your family and friends don't know as well. And obviously, this whole issue has spawned a lot of regulations, right? It's spawned GDPR in California. We have CCPA and CPRA and all these 3 and 4 letter acronyms, et cetera. So I think we need to take a look at the heart of the issues, why that's triggering all these laws that a lot of your listeners are building companies and products to address, and help corporations address as well. So I really wanted to get into this over collection and give a fresh look at why they're collecting all this information, what are some of the harms, what are some of the laws, et cetera. But again, doing it at a high level, so we're not too academic, not in the weeds, so people can just make sense of it all and be able to take action too.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's definitely a key topic as well, and you don't see too much addressing the recent behavior as well in terms of the online world. So, no, super excited for that to come out for sure, which is going to be really interesting. I think obviously the theme of these podcasts, Tom, they always differ depending on the person they have on. But you've had such a successful career; it'd be a shame not to talk about kind of the entrepreneurial side with you as well. So, I'm just going to start off maybe with, how do you become a successful entrepreneur?
Well, I think the first thing is that you really, unless you're going to sell something in the consumer space where you don't have, I mean, you just kind of understand consumer sentiment or what's hot, et cetera. But I think probably a lot of your listeners are more in the enterprise space, right? And so I think it's important that if you do go after the enterprise space, that you first develop some domain knowledge that where you're really good at something. And then you also are able, from a functional perspective, show competence either in sales or marketing or engineering or product development, et cetera. And then hopefully those skills can scale up and be portable when you take that next step to form a company. And then the other thing is that if you show that you have you're good at something with domain knowledge and competence and expertise, it's very important that you network with other people, and they understand and trust you and see that you're competent yourself, right? Because at the end of the day, when we talk about being an entrepreneur, it's a team sport, right? That companies are formed with multiple people. Like as an angel investor, oftentimes I'll have an individual entrepreneur come to me and say, I'm interested in starting a company, give me a bunch of money, right? And then I'll go find some other people who work for me. I'm like, well, hold on, wait a minute. First of all, if you get hit by a bus, the whole company goes away. So it needs to be a team of other individuals that complement each other. The second thing is that you need to be able to convince another person to join you in this journey, and have other people get religion on that, right? As opposed to like making that person buy in because they're getting a salary, et cetera. So it's important, really important that you become known as a trusted, competent person that gets shit done, that can be successful, and then you attract other people, or they start a company and they bring you in and you become a co-founder as well. So I think it's about that's the key thing. I mean, people think it's an individual, but if you look at most of the major tech companies have been formed, they've had a great core team of people that took the leap together, didn't take salary for the first year, and they complemented each other, just like a basketball team. You can't have five point guards. You need to have a center, a forward, a guard, et cetera, and they need to trust you. And I think that's also part of the equation to become a successful entrepreneur is you need to rely and on others.
Yeah, I think it's so key as well. I mean, even to the farm, even to the hiring at the early stage, 0 to 10 people, that them people that come on the door, they need to be in it with you and in it for the long run and expecting
In
good.
it to win it.
In it to
Yes.
yeah, that's the phrase for sure, Tom. But take me back to the early days of Centrify. I know obviously the identity world very well. You built that business to 100+ million ARR. So take me back to the early days of that. What was your core team like, and how can you give some kind of advice to entrepreneurs at that early days?
Yeah, I think the key thing with any company at the early stage is that they once you have the team in place, you got to make sure that the product itself is a must-have, right? It's actually a painkiller versus a nice to have or an aspirin. And so too often what I see is with companies that I'm talking to, you really got to dig down and figure out, do people really need to buy you? Because when you're a startup company, it's tough because especially in the security business, a lot of them are trying to sell to CISOs. And then what happens is there's already a queue outside the CISO's proverbial or virtual office of the large vendors where they spend 5, 10, $100 million on these large security players. And here you are, number 99 in line, right? And you don't even get considered or they won't return your phone calls, right? But if you can actually show that you have a must-have product. So I think the key thing was, especially in the early days of Centrify, we made sure that this is a product in the identity space that people needed to have, right? Because otherwise, bad things would happen. Either hackers would get in, or they would not be compliant from a PCI DSS perspective, or a Graham-Leach-Bliley, or a HIPAA, or SOX, et cetera. And so I think it's incredibly important that you make sure in the early days, and this is what we did at Centrify, that's why you grow, right? You grow because people need to buy your product and you overcome the odds of being a small startup based on the the how important and how critical your product is. And so I think that's the first and foremost. I can even go, I mean, I can like tell some more reasons why, what's needed as well if you want me to, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think it's definitely right. And I also think it's quite you hear it all the time. You can build something, but not necessarily when people will come. So once you've got the great product, what do you need to do after that?
Yeah. So I think the key thing is, I mean, first of all, number one is you got to make sure your product is a must-have, right? And you got to be honest about it. The second thing that needs to be done is that you hopefully you've picked a product in a market that is big enough that can sustain your ability to make some missteps, right? But also not too crowded, right? So clearly the VCs, if you're going the VC route, want to hear about billion-dollar plus markets, et cetera, right? And don't fool yourself that if in the end you're really in a small market, but it's okay to be in a smaller market. But then there's the other part of the equation, which is how competitive is the market. And another thing that I see is that oftentimes entrepreneurs will come to me and say, "Hey, I'm looking for some angel investing. I've got a better idea where I've got some features and functions that these companies don't deliver." And I'm looking at these other companies. Wait a minute, there's five of them and they've all raised 50, $100 million. And you've got a few little better widgets than they do as well. So I think the other thing is, from an entrepreneurial perspective, is not only is it a team sport, you need to be competent, you need to have a must-have product, but whatever market you're in, it needs to be, you need to hit it at the right stage where it's growing, it's going to become big, but it's not too crowded. Because otherwise, it's so easy for your competition to say, oh, well, after you start losing a few deals, or the competitors lose a few deals because you talk about this great feature, they say, oh, we're coming out with that in the next release, and that's it, and you don't have anything else, right? So I think you also need to make sure that you kind of hit the market at the right stage as well. And I think that's another critical thing, is that you need to think through as you're starting this, which is, how crowded is the market? Can I differentiate in the market?
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's super interesting, right? Because you get that early stage. I've even had CEOs on here where they're kind of creating markets, and it's super hard to kind of educate as well as trying to sell, and it's really, really hard. But then you kind of find them individuals who maybe take like you mentioned there, a smaller market, but not necessarily too big, like the CrowdStrikes of the world with the EDR solutions and the Sentinel ones, who just went crazy in an already established market, just made a better product, right? So yeah, super, super interesting. So not a lot of people I have a lot of startup people on the podcast, but taking a business from 0 to 100 million ARR, I'd love to know about that journey, the nuances of growth throughout that time. It'd be great to kind of break that down.
Yeah, so it all starts that at the end of the day, you have to have a must-have solution that's compelling. And then the other thing is, which I think is really important, really critical, that especially in the early days of startups, it tends to be founder-led deals. That they're the founders, the CEO, they're going out there and doing the initial evangelism. They're doing the sales themselves. They get the first 10, 15 customers. And then oftentimes we see things kind of like they plateau, right? And the CEO and the founders can continue to do go out and chase deals, but then they can only sell 5, 10 deals a year. And so you kind of get this plateau. So it's very hard for cybersecurity companies to break the $10 million barrier. That is like the big barrier that a lot of cybersecurity startups, face, that they can get the initial 10, 15, maybe even 50 customers over 3, 4, 5 years. They hit the $10 million, but really to kind of break out, that's the difficult thing. And so it really requires strong sales enablement, right? Where you really need to think about, as you're going through that, like, how can I clone myself and take my knowledge as CEO and impart it into the salesperson? And so you can shrink the sales call, I mean, the sales cycle, starting with the initial sales call, down significantly as well. So it doesn't require this incredible, passionate evangelism from a CEO that you need to figure out how to replicate it, so you can get into a repeatable sales model where you can clearly identify, when you hire new salespeople to scale the business, who exactly are you targeting, what is the message, what is the differentiator, et cetera. I mean, so at the end of the day, the way that you break through this $10 million barrier, where it's historically been founder CEO led sales, to get the initial customers, is that you need to build a repeatable model, which starts with having a clear sales enablement, but it also really relies on having a clear target of who you sell to and what's the use case, and then be able to give a sales rep that and say, no, don't talk to these 50 people in an organization, just talk to these 2 people with this message. And then that's how you build up the repeatability. So you really want to be in a situation where the sales guys are kind of like printing license plates. They put the metal in, they go bonk like this, and a customer is sold. That's where you really want to get to, is be able to build that repeatable sales model.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's the sales enablement piece I think you mentioned there, which was quite compelling, which is super, because I had a guy in the podcast a while ago who was a CRO, and he was talking about the craziness that's happened over the past couple of years with people just hiring and hiring and hiring, but the sales enablement has not been there because there's been too many hires. So tell me about that journey. How do you create that repeatable model? If you can give a few tips, that'd be amazing as well.
Yeah, again, I just double click. The repeat here's the problem that I see with a lot of tech companies, especially in the early stage, is that they tend to be they have a machine gun and they're just randomly firing bullets across different verticals, across different use cases. And another thing that kind of caps people out at that $10 million level is I mentioned before, it's well, the founders can't scale because they can sell 10 deals a year themselves, right? With this passionate evangelism. But that's one reason. The other reason is that they've sold to a large company in one vertical, and then they've sold to a small business with a different use case, et cetera. And so the problem is that now they're in a situation where they have to build some features and capabilities for a SMB in this one area for this use case, and they're building features and functions for another customer that it has a completely different set of needs and set of scalability requirements, et cetera. And then that also slows the product development down because once you get customers, right, then you've got debt to the customers. You've got technical debt terms of fixing bugs, but then you've got feature requirements. And so and you have a limited amount of engineering. And so the fundamental problem is that if you have too diverse of a customer base trying to address multiple use cases, yeah, 10 years from now, you can support 20 different use cases because you've built this incredible platform and you're a $100 million plus company and you've got a R&D team of say 30% of that. So that's 30 million. And then you do the division of, based on the OTE expense associated. So you've got, hundreds of engineers. Yeah, you can take on multiple things. But in the early stage, what you really need to do is try to be more of a sniper and say, you know what, I think this is the best, space I'm going to be in. I'm going to call it a vertical, but it's not a vertical necessary from an industry. It could be a vertical from a use case, right? And then you can apply kind of the traditional verticals. And so that gives you repeatability. So the same features and functions that you sell to customer number one would be the same set of features that you sell to customer 10, as opposed to having to build a lot of new features and capabilities. So I think the big fundamental issue from a scalability perspective to get that repeatability is that you need to kind of be concentrated in the use case associated with it, not necessarily the actual industry vertical, because the use case may be applicable right there, as opposed to trying to be all things to all people and trying to say, oh, we address that, we address that, we address that. But then the R&D person says, oh, there's no freaking way I can build 5 features here, 5 features here, 5 features there to address all these things. And then you get bogged down. And then you being not good at anything, end up being, oh, we're so far behind, a competitor in this area, we're so far behind a competitor in this area, and so far behind a competitor. So the key thing is be good, especially in the early days, in a niche, in a use case that allows you then to repeat the sales very easily without burdening the sales organization or the engineering organization.
I love it. I think it's great advice. I've read a few books as well that said very similar things about don't take on every single customer early days because they'll
It's hard to say no to customers in the early days when you're so desperate and they're like, oh my God, they're like this name brand Fortune 50 and they're going to be my lighthouse account. But if it turns out that if you it's a doing a deal with the devil, in that if you sign them up, then are they really just having you do kind of custom integration for their very, 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 very unique use case? Or if I sign them up, will I be able to turn around and sell to their competitors the same type of capability? And that's the decision. And I think people are so desperate to get the initial big deal and have that marquee brand name logo, et cetera, that they don't realize that if they actually say yes, that would stop them from having a repeatable model where you can sell to multiple entities with the same use case.
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing advice, and everybody listening is probably going to take that on board for sure, Tom. But I want to switch it up into the investing world now. Obviously,
Yes.
as you mentioned earlier, you invested in over or close to 15 companies right now. Two of them have already been on the podcast, which is super cool. Shout out to Uno and Serve Security. But I guess in terms of just give a quick intro into the investing world for yourself and some tips at the beginning.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've decided to invest my own personal money with a friend and my former co-founder at Centrify, Adam Mao. And we do it at the early stage, that pre-seed or seed round where we're really the first, money in, and depending on their needs, oftentimes we're just contributing to an existing venture capitalist that may be writing a check for a million or 2 million, and then we'll collectively put in 50,000 or a couple 100,000, and be like the second or third leg of the stool. But what we also try to do, or what I try to do, is provide mentorship to the entrepreneurs, and spend time just talking about the things that I've talked about here. I mean, this is actually very relevant, which is like, what's your use case, who you're going to sell to, because as I said before, especially in cybersecurity, and those are the two examples that you provided, in cybersecurity, it's crowded. The CISO has, a line outside their door of 100 vendors that want to talk to them and pitch the wares, and it's so noisy, et cetera. And so oftentimes what I try to do is not only provide money, but say, hey, is there a better route to sell the market? Maybe you can sell, for example, a security product, but maybe sell it to the developer, for example, or sell it to the person that's doing the identity management deployment, as opposed to purely selling it and having to go through the CISO, because the line outside the door for someone that does the identity stuff is maybe two or three vendors, and so you can be fourth in line as opposed to being number 100 in line as well. So what I try to do is, yeah, I invest my money, especially at the early stage, but I also just try to provide guidance, and help people out, and think through these very real issues of, you know, am I building a must-have product? Am I building it in a market that's going to be big but not overtly crowded, that I get crowded out? And how can I build a repeatable sales model, that allows me to eventually, as CEO, hand it over to a bunch of sales reps that I've hired, and that they can be successful, and I don't have to also be as a CEO, be the system engineer, and I can actually go about running the business, et cetera.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then switching, on its kind of head, then what do you look for when looking for investments as well? Because obviously the two I mentioned before, the entrepreneurs, they're absolutely amazing. So I'd love to know what you look
Yeah.
for in an entrepreneur.
Well, I think they both, in the case of Uno and Serve Security, both have kind of the same profile, that it starts with the actual founder themselves, and it's just not an individual, it's a team, right? And so they have someone, or one person or multiple people that complement the actual CEO. And so, because as I said before, we're almost kind of circling back. This is a team sport, right? And so I look at the quality of the team, and their commitment, and whether or not they actually have strong domain knowledge in this area, where they would have credibility that they've already learned the lessons 3 years ago, 4 years ago, about how to build a product, how to sell the product, how to market the product, as opposed to, on the job training. So it first and foremost starts with the team. And again, it's a team sport, as opposed to, I just get all the time, I get these great entrepreneurs, wanting to raise money. I'm like, God, you're a smart person. Convince someone else besides the guy writing a check to join you in this journey, because that would represent, that's a great, that shows that you would actually be credible, that if someone else is willing to, stop their existing careers, and join you in this journey as well. So it starts with the teams. And then from there, it goes into the whole market must have, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's because the reason I asked that as well, because when I was in Israel, I met probably eight, maybe stealth companies coming out or people looking for money, funding and things like that as well. So it always what I've learned is always around the actual entrepreneurs themselves and do they believe in that? And then it's talking about the market as well, which we've already gone through. But yeah, no, awesome stuff, Tom. Have we missed anything out in terms of the entrepreneurial journey or investing or things like that for little nuggets for the audience?
No, I think just look, I think the key thing is, for in the entrepreneurial journey, just, tell the truth because that means that you remember what you've said. And so I think it's very important to, be honest with your customers, your employees, your investors. And so I think it's also very important to have a strong, moral compass and that you're a professional because the reality is that, most startups are not successful, right? And so before I was part of NetIQ, I was part of a startup that wasn't as, I mean, still got acquired, but wasn't that successful, right? But through that journey, there was, and you learn a lot when you fail, actually. So, and the nice thing about Silicon Valley culture is that failure is okay because it gives you scar tissue and you learn what not to do, right? But also it goes to what type of person you are. Are you someone that could be trusted, someone that is a straight shooter, et cetera? Because down the road at your next company, et cetera, you know, those type of personal traits will be very important, whether or not you're brought on or whether or not you can attract people because people don't want to work with jerks, right? They want people that are straight shooters. And so that's, I think, my other bit of advice is that taking it, look, work really hard as an entrepreneur, try to build the company, and take it to the next level, have a great exit for yourself, your investors, your customers, et cetera. But take into account that there's only 0.0001% that become a unicorn and realize that unicorn and they sail off into the sunset. So it's so critical for you to be a credible individual, not only in terms of your expertise and knowledge, but who you are as a person. And whether you're trustworthy, you're honest, et cetera. Because when you start that company, right, that people invest in you, and they rely on you. And if you have a reputation for not having those type of traits, then you're not going to find people that want to join you. And so I think that's key. That's my last bit of advice: is be a fundamentally good person because you're going to have multiple at bats in the entrepreneurial journey. And so it's key to treat people with respect, be honest, et cetera.
Yeah, no, I love that. I was once telling somebody a few years ago that life comes around in full circles. Whether you like it or you don't, one day the person you're working with right now could be your boss in 5 years. You just never know. So
Or a potential customer, like that they've come and they become the CISO or the CIO, et cetera, and they'll the the best if you satisfy a customer and then typically what happens is, like, say the IT people from that one customer, they'll go to another company. They'll want to you want them to like call you up and say, "Hey, I've gone from bank A to bank B. I want to bring you guys in." That is the best way to have a repeatable sales model, is to make the customers happy, right? And then if they move on, they'll want to bring you. And luckily at Centrify, we had so many examples of people leaving the company that we sold to. We successfully had the product deployed. They went to a new company and they called us up. And then we didn't have to go through a competitive process, blah, 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 blah. It was like it greased the skids so much for us. And it's part of, like, not only your product works, but that you are quality people to deal with.
yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And that's a great way to end the podcast on, for sure. But I always like to leave with one question, and it takes it back right to the beginning. So if you had to go back to the beginning of your career and give yourself some advice, what would that be?
Um, I worked very hard, and I uh, probably was a little bit over obsessive about what was going on. So I probably would have said, hey, it's okay to take a little bit more break, or um, just take some, exercise a little bit more, or you know, take get up, take some more walks, or read a book, etc. So I would have just said, kind of definitely just look at it as more of a marathon, and sometimes you get so focused and you're working and you get stressed and et cetera. And so, but overall, I can't complain too much. So it would be only very gentle advice that I would give, is say, hey, it's okay, get up, stretch your legs, take a walk around the block, or it's okay to, you don't have to work necessarily the entire Sunday or up to 10 o'clock at night, et cetera. It's okay to, to take it easy, et cetera. So I think the key thing is also just having a healthy, work-life balance, and making, I mean, obviously you want to be in a situation where you love doing what you're doing, even if it may not be in a domain that you like. Oh, I didn't see myself doing software, right, when I was growing up. But maybe there's the intellectual challenge of hiring people, working with good people, and building something, and that charges your battery. But also try to apply that also to your personal life as well, and have a healthy, nice work-life balance. And so I think, just continue to strive for that, and just kind of gently remind yourself, just like if I were to go back in the past and remind myself, just, hey, keep on focusing, and this is really important to have, a good life, and a good work environment too.
I love it. I'll be taking a little bit of that advice on my own entrepreneurial journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But Tom, no, really appreciate you coming on the show. Everybody go and buy Containing Big Tech. It's out today. So go and check that out. But no, really appreciate you coming out, Tom, and good luck with everything as well.
Thank you very much for having me on the show here. It's been great, Elliot.